Hello and welcome back to An Old Man Watches, where today I'm going to be talking about Maniac, also known as Sex Maniac, which ought to give you some idea of the kind of film it is, from 1934. And the movie begins with a long text scrawl attributed to William S. Sadler, MD, who was a psychiatrist, surgeon, and spiritualist of some note during the early 20th century. The quote in question is about the psychological state of fear and how it leads to criminality. And when I say that the text scroll is long, I mean really long. This entire film clocks in at only 50 minutes. This quote takes over a minute to scroll through the past us. Eight full texts, full screens of text in total. We then finally get footage of actors introducing us to the character of Dr. Meyer Schultz, who, along with his assistant Maxwell, is endeavoring to find a means of restoring life to the dead. Now, mind you, it'll be nearly another minute of silent footage of the two men working in the lab before all of this is info dumped on us. But once the exposition starts, it doesn't stop. The conversation establishes that Meyer Schultz plans to steal a corpse from the morgue for his research. It establishes that Maxwell is afraid of the consequences if they are caught. Remember that long text scroll about fear that we just had? Could it be significant? And it also establishes that Maxwell is an expert impersonator, and it is this skill that Meyer Schultz plans to use in the theft. He intends Maxwell to impersonate the coroner in order to get access to the body. The heist proves a success, and not only that, so is Meyer Schultz's life restoring serum. The young woman it's tested on is returned to life. She admittedly seems a bit mentally limited, but perhaps that was always how she was. Meyer Schultz is keen to do more tests and sends Maxwell out for another body, but this time the younger man gets scared, and you're going to have to see the movie to learn why, because it's ridiculous. And so he returns empty handed, which is when the good doctor puts the mad in mad scientist. He gives Maxwell a gun and tells his assistant, "Shoot yourself. After all, there's no risk. You know we can bring you back to life, right?" Now, as you might imagine, Maxwell is not best pleased with this suggestion, and it's not himself that he chooses to shoot. Ding dong, the doc is dead. This leaves Maxwell with a problem, however. No, not the fact that he has a corpse on his hands. That's far too mundane for this movie. No, the problem is that Meyer Schultz financed his necromantic research via his day job as a psychiatrist, and his patients still expect to be seen. It's a good thing that Maxwell is an expert impersonator. I mean, there's no way a plan like pretending to be the person you murdered could ever go wrong, right? So Maniac was produced and directed by Dwayne Esper with a script penned by his wife, Hildegard Stady. Said script is a loose adaptation of Edgar Allan Poe's story The Black Cat, a very loose adaptation, though ironically no less loose than the official movie adaptation that was also released in 1934. Now, Maniac was Esper's fourth production, and like those before it, it was made on a minuscule budget. I've seen a figure of $7,500 has been quoted by the son of the movie's financier, and he self distributed the film as well. The film's initial release was a disappointment. It attracted basically no audiences, no attention. But then Esper hit on the clever idea of retitling it to Sex Maniac. This proved a great success as a marketing strategy because sex, it seems, really does sell. Critically, meanwhile, the movie became a bizarre dichotomy. While widely touted as one of the worst movies ever made, it also enjoys an 89% fresh rating on Rotten Tomatoes. So, how can this be? Well, let's discuss. And let's start, like the movie itself does, with that long text scroll. This is only the first of many such text scrolls that are dotted through the movie's runtime. Each of them discusses a different psychological malady, at least as those conditions are understood at the time. Paranoia, dementia, schizophrenia, and others all get a mention. So, what's going on here? You might guess it's just a cheap trick to pad out the film's thin runtime with a minimum possible effort. And to be fair, you probably got some merit in that thought. But it's not just that. You see, in 1934, the Hays Code applied very strict content restrictions on motion pictures made for entertainment purposes. But for films with an educational purpose, those restrictions were relaxed. It took people like Dwayne Esper all of 5 minutes to realize that if they gussied up their flicks with some kind of supposed educational content, they could dodge all those inconvenient restrictions on nudity and other requirements for moral rectitude. Thus, we get this film, which purports to be a dramatic dramatization of a series of psychological disorders, justified by the fact that it throws up one of these text scrolls every 10 minutes or so, while actually dishing up multiple topless women, several catfights, some with actual felines, and a simulated, to be clear, scene where a man strangles a cat and then eats the animal's eyeball. Some people have called Dwayne Esper the father of modern exploitation, and this film provides a very neat summation of why. So we've got a film ostensibly about madness. Is it apropos then for the script to be utterly crazy? Because this one definitely is. I've already mentioned Maya Schultz's bizarre expectation that Maxwell kill himself for science and Maxwell's equally crazy idea to impersonate the Doctor. But I don't think I've really unpacked that latter decision in full for you. You see, Maxwell doesn't just pretend to be Maya Schultz. He continues to run the Doctor's psychiatric sessions, a role for which, of course, he is completely unqualified, up to and including administering a sedative injection on one client. So he doesn't just pretend to be Maya Schultz and then kind of shut things down and close them up. No, he decides he's going to be a psychiatrist. Now, to be fair to Maxwell, when he goes to inject the sedative, he intends to only administer a placebo, not a real chemical. But since he is, as mentioned earlier, completely unqualified, what he actually administers is a compound of superadrenaline, which turns the already highly strung patient into a slavering, snarling wild man. Said wild man promptly scoops up the newly resurrected young woman, rips off her top, and you can be sure that Esper makes her now bare breasts the central focus of the camera shot, and runs off into the street with her. Now, in a sane or at least coherent film, of course, a wild man roaming the streets while carrying a topless and legally deceased woman would be the kind of thing that has consequences. But this is not that kind of movie. This entire scene exists solely for that topless shot. None of this will ever be addressed again. Also, not addressed by this film, the fact that the actor playing the young woman appears to be completely different in this scene than she was earlier. The bizarre plot choices and character decisions definitely don't end there, mind you. This movie packs a lot of wild stuff into its scant length, and to paraphrase the excellent website 1000 Misspent Hours, keep your hands ready to catch your jaw because otherwise you're going to have a nasty bruise when it hits the floor. Now, you may have heard of the concept of so bad it's good. The sad fact is, while such films do exist, they are a rare breed. Most films that are bad simply by not being good. And so good that it's so not good that it's good is an impossibility. You can't mediocre your way to inadvertent greatness. To be so bad it's good requires a film to have something more than just the script being a mess or the acting being poor or the sets being cardboard. Indeed, it has to do more even than having all of those things. So bad it's good films need to have moments where the audience stares eyes wide and jaws agape. It has to have Star Crash's nonchalant disregard for the laws of either narrative or physics. It has to have The Room's narcissistic, self-absorbed rantings of a talentless would-be auteur. It has to have Hard Ticket to Hawaii's blithe oblivious to its own absurdity. It has to have food fights. Well, pretty much everything in Food Fight would qualify, actually, as I will one day discuss. So, which films attain the status of so bad it's good? Well, that'll vary from viewer to viewer. It's clear that for a significant number of people, Maniac makes the list with its supremely cynical text card inserts, its flagrant exploitation, and its absurd plot points. It's certainly a memorable viewing experience. I will admit to finding myself entertained, but whether you will find the same is much more open to question. Next time, I like professional wrestling and I like horror movies. So the 2011 offering Monster Brawl, in which various supernatural monsters have a fighting tournament, should have been a surefire success for me. They found plenty of ways to mess it up, though. But that is next time. For now, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you've seen Maniac, let me know what you thought of it.